The landscape of PC gaming has evolved significantly over the past few years, with prices of components fluctuating in ways we couldn't have predicted. Previously, we delved into the realm of budget gaming PCs, exploring the potential of achieving current-gen console performance without breaking the bank. But now in 2024, we're shifting our focus to mid-range gaming PCs. Mid-range systems offer a balance between cost and performance, aiming to deliver a superior gaming experience than budget systems without the hefty price tag of a high-end setup. So let's dive into the world of mid-range gaming PCs, examining the cost effectiveness, performance capabilities, and the overall value they bring to the table in today's market. Let's discuss that in this video. Hey, if you enjoy content like this, drop a like, make sure to subscribe, and smash that bell so you never miss another video. Hey, what is going on guys? Danny here, welcome back to the channel and I hope you've all been doing well. This is a follow-up video to one of my recent discussions that I did on the channel where we looked at a price range you guys find is appropriate for a budget build in 2024. Furthermore, we looked at what kind of parts you'd be able to get and the type of performance you can expect. I'll have a link to that video down in the description if you want to check it out. From doing a bit of research online, taking your input, and seeing what's available on the market, it became obvious that from the various tiers and their corresponding price ranges we were accustomed to, that had changed substantially over the past few years, and that was mainly due to GPU pricing. In our last video, the budget build we looked at, which I believed would deliver the user great value for their money, was around $850. If you were to go back to say 2016, that would be a price range which I think would be bordering on the region of mid-range, but typically a solid mid-range gaming PC would be around the $1,000 to $1,200 mark. However, as I mentioned earlier, prices have gone up thanks to GPUs becoming considerably more expensive, where now the range for a mid-range card is around that $600 to $800 mark, which eats up a considerable portion of our budget. Therefore, in 2024, I believe that a solid mid-range build will cost you around $1,500 to $1,800, and that can also vary depending on a lot of various factors. Because with mid-range builds, you have a lot more flexibility. You choose which areas in computing you want to prioritize, whether that'd be gaming, productivity, or you want a good balance. Whereas in a more constrained budget, you have less options or routes to take with your build. I can still see a lot of people going, wow, that's quite a jump. I remember going a few years back that for $1,800, I'd be able to build a gaming PC that would be considered high-end, and you'd be correct. You actually don't even have to go that far back, but when the RTX 30 series came out, the RTX 3080 at launch before the crypto boom was selling for around $700, or during the Pascal era, the GTX 1080 Ti launched at $700. However, I wanted to clear this up because now initially with the RTX 40 series, you had the 4080 at $1,200, which was recently brought down to $1,000 for the Super Series, or AMD's RX 7900 XTX for $1,000 at launch. And then of course you've got an RTX 4090, which is the best gaming GPU you can buy, but right now it goes for around $1,700. Then in 2024, an actual high-end build will be substantially more money. People still deny this, but cards like the 4070 Ti, the 4070 Ti Super, 4070 Super, 7900 XT, these are mid-range cards. And so at even $800, you're not a high-end buyer. It no longer gets you a high-end card. With that said, a mid-range build at this price range of $1,500 to $1,800, you can expect it to do pretty much everything a high-end gaming PC would be capable of, whether that'd be high refresh gaming or playing single-player titles with all the eye candy enabled at resolutions like 1440p and even 4K depending on the title. I find most high-end builds are needed for those that want a plethora of cores or are chasing after all the frames they can get, or they're targeting 4K 120Hz and want to experience the latest tech with the lowest performance impact, i.e. path tracing. So with all that said, I think it's time we looked at our mid-range builds, and because we're going to be looking at 3 different builds and some variations, I won't be going over the parts individually as I did in my last video, as that would just take up too much time. For our first build, this is going to be one that delivers the user the best gaming performance without them having to worry about tuning their system. Out of the box, it will be performing great. This is a build which uses the AMD Ryzen 7 7800X3D for its CPU. Many argue that it's the best gaming CPU you can buy for the money. Now, I know some will argue that that's not true, but I did say out of the box. Regardless, this CPU won't be holding back any GPU out there, so should the user decide to upgrade down the road, they know they'll have the CPU horsepower to keep up for a bit. Now, for the CPU cooler, this was an easy choice. I decided to go for Thermalright's latest Phantom Spirit Evo. Thermalright have been on an absolute tear lately when it comes to CPU coolers, especially air cooling. They make it very hard to recommend anyone else. They're priced very aggressively, and what's astonishing is that you're not sacrificing anything when it comes to to performance. This Phantom Spirit Evo can even give some liquid cooling options a run for their money, and around $43, it's providing you with impeccable value. The 7800X 3D, while it runs efficiently when it comes to power draw, it can still get decently hot because it's using 3D V-Cache. When you're using a stacked solution like this, your package is densely packed, thus you get a higher concentration of heat. It's why the X3D parts can't boost as high as the non-3D counterparts, but that doesn't really affect its performance if at all. For the motherboard, since this is a gaming-oriented build, we didn't necessarily need to go all out with one that had tons of I/O or tuning features. This MSI B650 Plus board will do the job just fine. For the memory, we have Team Group's T-Create. I like these sticks because they're low profile, they run cool, don't have any RGB LEDs, and the OEM heatsinks they're using are quite good. It's a 32GB kit rated to run at 6000 mega transfers, which is ample for an X3D part, and it has some pretty decent timings as well with its XMP profile, or as AMD's calling it, Expo. For storage, it's a 1TB Gen 4 NVMe Western Digital, the SN850X. I hate how we're back to seeing an uptrend in SSD prices again, but it is what it is. This drive will serve the user absolutely fine. It's a blazing fast drive for all your games, storage, etc. Alright, so for the GPU, which will be the main driving force behind this build, I went with the RTX 4070 Ti Super. You can find this GPU at its MSRP of $799. I'm sure you've all seen the reviews. It's a great GPU when it comes to gaming across various resolutions, though I take it for a build like this, the user will most likely be using a 1440p high refresh monitor, and this card will definitely be able to deliver, and it'll also be able to do some 4K gaming too. It really depends on the types of games you're playing and what kind of settings you're using. If you want to use ray tracing, then this card will be able to perform, just don't expect 144 FPS, and you'll have to use DLSS, but I see many people these days are totally fine with upscaling. In fact, it's one of the first options I see many people just turning on by default. But typically, most people are using ray tracing in single player titles anyways, whereas in competitive shooters like Call of Duty, Fortnite, and more, you're going to be dialing down settings to max out your FPS. Alternatively, you can actually save around $100 and go for the RX 7900 XT. This GPU has recently dropped to around $700, which makes it a pretty compelling option in my opinion. It's the price range it should have launched at to begin with, but nevertheless, you've got a GPU that offers 4 more gigabytes of VRAM, or the 4070 Ti Super offers similar raster performance, but when it comes to ray tracing and some other aspects like upscaling, it is inferior compared to the Nvidia solution. Nvidia also has other features available to the user, like their RTX chat for running local LLMs. If you're into that kind of stuff, you know, with all the AI craze these days, you've got RTX HDR, which can be a hit or miss, but this is another alternative to the built-in Windows HDR and many other types of software features, so it's up to the end user what they want to do here, what games they play, what kind of features they want, etc. For the case, this was a part I cheaped out on the most because it's really your choice. I pretty much put this as a placeholder, this Phanteks case. It'll do the job just fine, but if the user wants something with a bit more flash, that's dual chambered, etc., then they can extend their budget how they please and get a different case. And for the power supply, it's the Thermaltake Tough Power GF1. It's a revised model of their previous Gen 80 Plus Gold line, but it will be absolutely adequate for this build. Totaling up our parts, we get a total of $1,706.93, which comes in at that price point we were talking about earlier. Guys, if mid-range GPUs were still selling for around $400, then we'd be at that price range of around $1,300. And I gotta be honest here, while the 7800X 3D gets all the praise for being the king of gaming CPUs, it's still an 8-core CPU at the end of the day, and in 2024, in my opinion, I'd be expecting 8-core CPUs to be selling well below this price point. And I mean, you can buy an R7 7700 for around $270, but I mean, come on, it's 8 cores. We should be getting 8 cores at less than $250. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. But overall, this is still a solid mid-range build. It'll handle plenty of games you can throw at it, and the user will even be able to delve into some multi-core workloads too. Now, if you were looking for a build that would be still considered mid-range, but you can save a bit of money, let's say over $300, you can go with this build here. This gaming PC is using the Intel i5 14600KF, which will give you a CPU sporting 6 P cores and 8 E cores, so it's a 14-core CPU, which will actually make it better for multi-threading than the 7800X 3D, and like I said, if you know how to tune the CPUs, you can basically get it to the level of a 7800X 3D when it comes to gaming, in some cases even better for games that don't scale off of cache and care more about single core speed. And for games, DDR4 is still perfectly fine, especially tunable BDI RAM, which I've gone with here, so I didn't need a high-end Z790 board. This MSI MPG Z690 Edge Wi-Fi DDR4 board will do the job just fine, along with our 16GB of DDR4 LPDDR4. In regards to the memory, I would have liked to have gone with 32 gigabytes. I mean, you still can, it'd just be around another $60 or so, but I was trying to trim out the cost here as much as possible, and I think for now 16 gigabytes is still fine for a gaming oriented build. Then for the GPU, we've got an RTX 4070 Super. So you're looking at around 20% less performance in games when compared to the 4070 Ti Super, but despite that performance deficit, this is still a very capable card, especially for 1440p gaming. You're getting 3090 levels of performance, and that is what I'm currently using in my personal rig hooked up to a 1440p 165Hz monitor, and I have no complaints. Plenty of modern games run just fine, and for competitive FPS, I'm able to attain excellent frame rates. So with the GPUs being the main driving force for these two builds we looked at, then the cost for the build at $1,400 makes sense, as that's a 20% gap. And as we just saw, the performance difference between these two cards is 20%. So you can decide that, hey, if you're okay with that 20% less performance, you can go for the Intel build and save up 20% of your money. Now, the third build I wanted to take a look at, and this is more of a jack of all trades build, is this one featuring the 13700K. Now, this build costs around $100 more than the 7800X3D build, but with this build, you're getting a really good CPU with 8 P cores and 8 E cores, so it'll provide you with not just excellent gaming performance, but it will be a powerhouse when it comes to multi-threading workloads. So if you have a build, or if you have a scenario where you're going to be diving into a lot of content creation, productivity apps, and you need more cores rather than having more FPS, then this build is something I think you'll definitely want to go for. For the CPU cooler, I went with Arctic's latest Freezer 3. Been hearing a lot of good things about it and been scouring for them here in Canada so I can test it, but I've heard it should just do an excellent job for cooling the 13700K, especially when it comes with a contact frame, which is, I think, crucial for Intel. For the motherboard, I wanted to go with something a bit more higher end, but because RAM prices have been on the rise, going with a corresponding A-die kit to match was pushing up the budget quite a bit. But in any case, this is a solid M-die kit, which the user should be able to get a nice overclock and boost from, and I'm going to emphasize that to you guys here. This is a build you should get if you want to tune and tweak. Otherwise, I recommend sticking with the AMD build. And then for the GPU, we've got the 4070 Ti Super, or again, you can save $100 and go for the 7900 XT. So those are our three mid-range builds. Prices have gone up for sure, because as I said not too long ago, this could have gotten you a build that was considered pretty high-end, but nevertheless, these rigs will provide the user with ample performance, whether that's gaming, productivity, content creation, and more. They will be able to handle all sorts of tasks you throw at them. These kinds of videos and topics are always a little fun exercise to partake in every once in a while, because it gives me a good perspective on how things are currently in the market. If someone had X amount of dollars, what kind of build can they get? And based on those parts, what kind of performance can they expect? While these machines do have a fairly substantial upfront cost, regardless of which one you pick or if you make a variation of your own, you can have the peace of mind that it is going to last you for a good 5 years or so before you even think about upgrading. Whereas someone on the lower $600 or $800 builds, while they didn't pay as much upfront, they'll end up getting the upgrade itch even sooner and might end up paying more in the long run. Alrighty guys, so that's going to do it for this one. We'll touch base in the next video. If you guys found this video to be informative and entertaining, then leave a like. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Be sure to check out the video description for cool links and ways to support the channel, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, then consider subscribing. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.